All right, let's put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 350 likes on this show. So smash that like button, subscribe, make us a part of your regular routine. And again, a reminder from a programming perspective, we are going to be bringing you live editions of Inside College Basketball Now throughout the 25-26 college basketball season on Mondays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. And if you can't be with us live because you have a lunch meeting or something else going on, get us on your commute home or during your early morning workout via Apple and also Spotify. And also, in addition to those live shows on Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern, we will also be bringing you additional episodes throughout the week with exclusive interviews with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. Tuesday at 8 a.m. Eastern, we will chat with Vanderbilt's Mark Byington. The door is off to a 14-0 start entering Wednesday's game against Alabama. But as always, we had a busy weekend in college basketball, and that leads us once again to three big things. And the first big thing I want to get to revolves around a team from the Big East, and that's St. John's. And St. John's is at an early crossroads. Now, on Saturday, the first, in my opinion, first conference Saturday of the 25-26 college basketball season, we had several blue blood programs lose. North Carolina, Kansas, who I'll get to later in the show, Kentucky, UCLA as well. But no loss was as damaging in college basketball for a power conference team as St. John's lost to Providence at Madison Square Garden, and I'm going to tell you why now. Providence is a team that could very well turn around its season and finish at the top of the Big East, but right now where things look from a metrics perspective, Providence will equate to a quad 3 loss on St. John's resume. That is something that is going to follow the Red Storm around like a 5-pound dumbbell on its ankle from now until Selection Sunday. And given the fact that St. John's did not move the needle a great deal during its non-conference schedule in November and December, and given the fact that St. John's does not necessarily have a lot of major opportunities to be a team that's going to get a lot of quad 1 opportunities in Big East play, the urgency and the desperation now comes for the Red Storm during the first week of January. I know it's the first week of the calendar year. I know that we still have 9.5 weeks roughly until Selection Sunday, maybe a little bit more, closer to 10 weeks. But with that said, St. John's now has a pivotal week. The Red Storm are going to play Butler Tuesday at Hinkle Fieldhouse, and Saturday travel to Creighton. Both games are huge for St. John's, a program that came into this season with aspirations of building off last year, aspirations of building off a team that was a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, aspirations of being in a situation where because it has a Hall of Fame coach in Rick Pitino, it could be a factor and a threat to play deep into the NCAA tournament. Right now, the biggest thing that St. John's needs to focus on is making the NCAA tournament. And the road to get there got a lot more difficult after Saturday's loss against Providence. Now, the head coach is still Rick Pitino. The head coach is somebody who has still been in a situation where he has taken teams that had less talent and had them overachieve. This has been much more challenging of a season than anybody anticipated for St. John's, including myself. And I will be honest, and I've said this to people about my own rationale. I looked at St. John's roster man for man, and the individual talent to me was and still is staggering. But with that said, a lot of the things that the team we saw a year ago, defensively, role allocation wise, and specifically at the point of attack with Kadari Richmond and Davon Smith, are nowhere near existent with this current basketball team. Role allocation remains an obvious work in progress, and that's directly correlated to point guard play. And another thing that I think you're really starting to see, the talent individually for St. John's is obviously staggering, but do the pieces necessarily fit together? That has been something that I think we're really, really starting to see. There are major issues defensively on the backboard. There are major issues, especially at the point of attack. And part of the reason why St. John's perimeter players struggled so badly against Providence on Saturday was because we have yet to see anybody on this roster emerge as a bona fide playmaker. Now, I was not the only person who was extremely high on St. John's prior to the season. They were ranked 5th, according to the AP poll, to start the year. But the bet that a lot of people made when they looked at St. John's roster, even if St. John's did not have a traditional point guard, even if St. John's was only bringing back, in terms of players of significance from last year, Zuby Ejiofor and Ruben Prey, people were betting on Rick Pitino. And 9 times out of 10 over the last 30 or 40 years, that has been a bet that makes a lot of sense to make. Rick Pitino is somebody, again, who has taken teams with less talent to unexpected heights. St. John's now is a team that is lacking chemistry. It is lacking role allocation. It is lacking a defensive tenacity that we saw a year ago. And most of all, it's lacking point guard play. The season is nowhere near over. But I will say this. We are a little less than 10 weeks away from Selection Sunday. St. John's has about as important a week as you can have in early January this week, with a road trip looming to Butler and a road trip looming to Creighton. And honestly, given the state of the Big East right now, St. John's needs to win both games. Now, I'll say this when it comes to the state of the St. John's resume. When you identify the fact that 3 Big East teams, UConn, Villanova, and Seton Hall, have pushed out from the rest of the league, if you are a fan of a team like St. John's, you want to be in a situation where those teams continue to win, because that is going to augment your ability and enhance your ability to have marquee opportunities. But I will still say this on January 5th, and I give full credit to Kevin Willard at Villanova and Shaheen Holloway at Seton Hall. But the only team that I have true confidence in to continue on the same path it is exuded so far this season, from now until Selection Sunday and go into March with a great resume among Big East teams, is UConn. We still don't know if Villanova is going to be able to sustain this. Villanova has done an incredible job of winning the games it's supposed to win and not taking any bad losses. The only losses Villanova has is to BYU and Michigan. But Villanova was also down 10 in the second half last week at home against DePaul. Seton Hall is having a dream season under Shaheen Holloway. Part of it is great evaluating. Part of it is great coaching. Part of it is divine intervention. As we saw Sunday against Creighton, when Najai Hines got that offensive rebound and went back up and scored the winning basket with less than a second to play. But are Villanova and Seton Hall going to be able to consistently go on the road and not take any bad losses? Are they going to be able to beat the DePauls, the Xaviers, the Marquettes when they play them consistently? Because the better they play, the more the opportunities are going to be for St. John's to move the needle. Because if Villanova and Seton Hall can keep their metrics right, that is 4 more opportunities for St. John's to have big wins, obviously, in addition to the 2 games against UConn. But make no mistake about it, the 9-5 start is a disappointment. The Providence loss was the biggest disappointment of all the losses that we saw in college basketball on Saturday. And now, on January the 5th, you can say without hesitation that an early crossroads exists for a team that many people, including myself, thought had a chance to be a top 16 protected seed on Selection Sunday and a high seed in the NCAA tournament. There's great talent on St. John's roster. There is not a great basketball team, at least not yet, and we haven't seen it. And the road to having a chance to play in the NCAA tournament starts this week, and it's a dangerous, dangerous road. St. John's has won the last 2 meetings against Butler at Hinkle Fieldhouse. It has also lost the last 2 meetings at Creighton, 2 on the last play, actually, under Rick Pitino. These are not going to be easy places to play. Butler has played good basketball this year under Thad Matta, has a win on its resume over Virginia. Creighton, up until yesterday's loss at Seton Hall with the second left, had won 4 games in a row. It's a pivotal week for Rick Pitino and St. John's, a week that ultimately you can say will define the Red Storm season. Because at 9-5, 2 road wins give obviously a boost to your resume and get you a little bit above sea level. And coming up next for St. John's, these are your next 4. At Butler, at Creighton, home against the struggling Marquette team, and then a road trip to Villanova. But make no mistake about it, the loss to Providence is not going away unless the Friars somehow recalibrate their season. And I'm not saying that's impossible because Providence has talent in the backcourt. But unless the Friars do that, that loss, a quad 3 defeat to Providence, will follow St. John's around, again, like a 5-pound dumbbell around its ankle from now until Selection Sunday. The second big thing I want to get to, Darryn Peterson's situation is becoming a nuisance for Kansas. And again, I want to encourage everybody listening to the show and watching the show to leave us comments in the chat. I'm going to get to them later in the show in segment 2. There's a lot of different things, obviously, that we are going to get into, but we want you to get into the chat. I'm going to get to them in a little bit. So let's talk about Darryn Peterson in Kansas right now. This is officially becoming a nuisance. This is becoming something that just won't go away. This is something like a pebble in your shoe that always seems to linger. Darryn Peterson was ridiculous on Saturday against UCF. Darryn Peterson dropped 26 in 23 minutes before leaving the game once again due to a lingering injury. There were different injuries early in the season. Then all of a sudden it was a quad, it was this, it was that. But we are seeing now a scenario where Kansas cannot have any rhythm, chemistry, or role allocation with Darryn Peterson continuing to pull himself out of games. Now, nobody is debating the fact that Darryn Peterson is a world-class talent. This guy is a ridiculous offensive player. He's got great size. He's got great shooting ability. He's got great accuracy. He's got a great feel for the game. He is an awesome, awesome talent. That is why he is in play to be potentially the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 NBA draft. But when Bill Self said during one of the times that Peterson was out of the lineup, when Bill Self said that he was waiting on word from Darryn Peterson's camp, whether or not Darryn Peterson was going to return, I knew then and there that this was not going to be a thing that Kansas was going to be able to weather. Because when you are at the mercy of somebody else, running a program and putting a team together with a mission to win is secondary to what that camp feels is best. And it's impossible to win at the highest level. These are the gaps and dates for Darryn Peterson this year in games that he's played. He played the opener against Green Bay on November 3rd. He played against North Carolina on the 7th. Then there was a gap. He came back for the Missouri game on December 7th. He then played against NC State on the 13th of December. NC State lost that game to Kansas in overtime. Then he came back and played on January 3rd last Saturday against UCF and then took himself out of the game late. The gap right there did absolutely nothing to establish any rhythm, any chemistry, any role allocation for Kansas. Now, I will say this, and if you've watched this show and you followed this show, obviously since last summer, you know my feelings on Kansas. Even if Darryn Peterson is available for the Jayhawks, Kansas is not a team that is among the top 5 teams in the Big 12. Now, Kansas could still be the 6th best team in the Big 12 and be a top 16 protected seed on Selection Sunday. But Kansas, and you tell me if I'm wrong, leave a question or a comment in the chat. Kansas isn't ahead of Arizona, not ahead of Iowa State, BYU, Houston, or Texas Tech. So now, if you're trying to put together a team to win, which is the operative thing, not necessarily put together a team with a guy who's showcasing his talents for the NBA, because you don't always win big that way. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Last year, Rutgers had Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, two of the top 5 picks in the NBA draft. Rutgers went 15 and 17. 3 times in the last 10 years, we have seen players be the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft. Markelle Fultz at Washington, Anthony Edwards at Georgia, Ben Simmons at LSU. Those 3 players played on teams that did not make the NCAA tournament. I'm curious if the Kansas fan out there now would prefer Darryn Peterson to shut it down for the season and you move on with the continuity you saw in November without him. Because I'll say this, when Kansas knew the core of players that it had, and when Kansas knew it didn't have Darryn Peterson in the Champions Classic at Madison Square Garden against Duke, and Kansas did not have Darryn Peterson in the Players Era Festival in Las Vegas, Kansas didn't necessarily have great talent, but Kansas had rhythm. Kansas had role allocation. Kansas had a team that could be a decent and capable college team that could stay in the top 25. And I didn't expect to see that in Las Vegas. That's a credit to Bill Self. But for the Kansas fan right now, would you rather roll with Darryn Peterson and this musical chairs type of scenario that we're seeing, or would you rather go to bat every single game and know that we're going to have the following rotation? Melvin Council's playing a big role on the perimeter, and he is cemented there. Trey White is a major piece to the puzzle. We know in the backcourt we can either play Jamari McDowell, we can play Elmarco Jackson. Up front, we're going to have Badunga, we're going to have Tiller. What would you prefer? Because for me right now, given what I saw from Kansas in November against Tennessee and Syracuse and Notre Dame, when Kansas had a really good week before Thanksgiving at the Players Era Festival, I would rather have that than the inconsistency of watching a guy drop 26 and 23 minutes and then leave in the second half. I mean, and let's be honest right now. No disrespect to UCF, who's off to its best start in program history. Kansas lost the game to UCF on the road. If Kansas is going to be vintage Kansas, how is it going to beat these teams if obviously Darryn Peterson is getting 26 and 23 minutes and it still can't win? Still can't win. It's not getting any easier. Kansas has TCU coming up this week next at Allen Fieldhouse. TCU is no pushover. They're not talked about as much as some of the other teams in the Big 12, but that is a capable basketball team. Jaden Pierre, Brock Harding, Latoris Lelavicius, all via the transfer portal. David Punch, solid role player at the 4, much like Jamie Dixon had when he was at the University of Pittsburgh. That's a capable team coming to the Phog this week. And beyond that, Kansas still has 7 games, 7 in the regular season against the top 5 remaining teams in the Big 12. And I'm going to go through it again. Arizona, Iowa State, Houston, BYU, Texas Tech. I'm making a prediction right now. For the 3rd straight season, Kansas is going to have double-digit losses. And remember this, prior to last season, Kansas had never lost 10 or more games in back-to-back seasons under Bill Self. And this is the hard thing right now, not just for Bill Self, but for every college coach in America. When you are a head coach now in college basketball, you are not just a coach, you're a fundraiser. You're somebody who obviously is going to go out and have to raise money for your collective to go out and get players like Darryn Peterson, players, again, that are going to be potentially stars at the next level. So if you are going to raise money and you are going to ask for financial help, the people who are putting up that money are interested, if they are putting the money up, in seeing these players perform. But the problem is, in this scenario and in other scenarios, we are seeing situations where that is not on the head coach. The head coach isn't making that decision. It's on the camp of the player who, again, is about to earn generational money at the NBA level. But that doesn't align with college basketball. You can make a lot of money now in college basketball. You can make more, obviously, than you used to because you weren't making anything before due to name, image, and likeness. But for all intents and purposes, this is a difficult scenario for Bill Self. And here's the Cliff Notes version. With or without Darryn Peterson, Kansas is not in the top 5 of the Big 12. I do think with him, Kansas could be a team that finishes 6th in the Big 12 and goes to the Sweet 16 because it will do enough to obviously get a quality seed in the NCAA tournament. But beyond that, Kansas now is going to have to navigate this situation against a schedule that is ruthless in the Big 12. 7 games against the top 5 teams in the conference. That's not counting the Big 12 tournament. The third big thing I want to get to, the ACC had a really good week in conference play and had a really, really good weekend. And the ACC is a conference that we have spent a lot of time talking about. And the ACC has spent a lot of time trying to tweak things so that its league is better from a national perspective. 2 years ago, the ACC had 5 teams in the NCAA tournament. Should have been 4 if they're, when you think about it, because Virginia did not deserve to be in the field that year. It's Tony Bennett's last season at Virginia. NC State got in that year by winning the ACC tournament. So in essence, the ACC could have had 3 in the NCAA tournament if NC State did not win the ACC tournament and Virginia didn't get in. Last year, the ACC got 4 teams into the NCAA tournament, and Carolina, as we have documented on this show and in other forums, was a very, very controversial choice. ACC is in position to double its NCAA tournament representation from a year ago. I could see a scenario right now where the ACC gets 8 teams into March Madness. Duke, Carolina, Louisville, Clemson, and Virginia all look like locks to me. Duke is obviously a consensus top 5 to 7 team in the country. Carolina, even though it lost to SMU on Saturday, still is obviously going to be a force with Wilson and Vessar up front. Louisville is dealing with the Michael Brown situation, but Louisville has an All-American in Ryan Conwell and obviously one of the best cultures in the sport. Clemson is obviously a consistent presence in the league by Brad Brownell. And Virginia, to me, is underrated nationally because we have spent so much time, I've spent so much time talking about Dusty May's ability to compose his roster at Michigan. The guy who has done an elite job as well, in addition to Dusty May at putting together a roster, is Ryan Odom. Ryan Odom, and I saw this when I went to Charlottesville during the preseason, has put together a roster with great depth, with multiple ball handlers, with shooting, with great size, with 4 to 5 front court players. Virginia is a team that I could see getting better and better as the season goes on. And Virginia is a team that I think could push for a top 4 finish this year in the ACC. Virginia went to NC State on Saturday and dominated NC State from what it felt like tip to finish. Now, I know Virginia had a tough loss in a triple overtime defeat to Virginia Tech last week, but that did not dissuade me from thinking this team has long-term potential. There's 2 foreigners up front, Testa Ritter and Johan Grunlow. There's obviously capable veteran perimeter players. It is not just one player. One game on the wing, it could be Malik Thomas. The next could be Sam Lewis. Dallin Hall started for BYU last year in the NCAA tournament. Chance Mallory is a really talented freshman. I think Virginia is a team that I would say isn't just going to make the NCAA tournament under Ryan Odom. Virginia, to me, looks like a team that could advance in the NCAA tournament. So I see 5 locks in the ACC. Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, Clemson, and Virginia. And then you have a pocket of teams, SMU, NC State, Notre Dame, Cal, Stanford, all in the mix. Virginia Tech as well, even though Virginia Tech had a tough loss on Saturday to Wake Forest. Virginia Tech's a good basketball team. SMU, I talked about on last week's show for a while, and I think you saw against North Carolina what the Mustangs are capable of. SMU has, again, one of the more electric backcourts that you have not seen this season. Boopie Miller, Jaron Pierre, and also B.J. Edwards. Another thing I want to point out, too, about Boopie Miller, who was ridiculous against North Carolina. Boopie Miller is somebody, again, who transferred up from Central Michigan to Wake Forest and now is flourishing at SMU. He's an older guard, but he's a player to me that is an all-ACC first-team caliber talent. And B.J. Edwards, who I had referenced, the only player in college basketball this season to have multiple triple-doubles. What are the biggest things on your mind when it comes to last weekend in college basketball? What do you think of the slow start at St. John's? What should Bill Self do with Darryn Peterson? Get in the chat now. Leave a comment. I'm going to get to them in just a bit. We're also going to react to some of the other things that are going on in college basketball. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.
The new era of UFC on Paramount Plus comes out swinging. Show-stopping highlight machine Justin Gaethje collides with Liverpool phenom Paddy Pimblett in a must-see main event for the interim lightweight belt.
This is how I get down.
And Hall of Famer Amanda Nunes returns.
She's the best ever.
To take on bantamweight champion Kayla Harrison in the biggest women's title fight of all time. UFC 324, Saturday, January 24th, only on Paramount Plus.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you, if you're watching on YouTube, to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now. We want to get up to 350 likes on the show. And also a programming note, Inside College Basketball Now will be coming to you live on Mondays and Thursdays during the 25-26 college basketball season at 1 o'clock Eastern. If you can't make it at 1 o'clock Eastern, join us on your commute either at night or in the morning on Apple and Spotify. We need an army with us every single time we do Inside College Basketball Now. And we want you to be all you can be. And also a reminder, there will be special episodes, additional episodes throughout the week with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. Tuesday, we have an exclusive chat with Vanderbilt's Mark Byington, who has his team off to a 4-0 start that hits YouTube at 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning. But now, as always, I am going to do my thoughts on this week's AP Top 25. So here's a Rothstein reaction. Let's see it. All right. Arizona, Michigan, Iowa State, UConn, Purdue, Duke, Houston. Houston is a little bit high for me at 7. I believe I voted Houston 9th, but I don't have too many problems with that. Let's go to the next page. Gonzaga, BYU, Nebraska 10. I have Nebraska a little bit higher. I have Nebraska actually in the 7 hole, and I moved Michigan State only to 10 instead of 12 because I thought that Michigan State losing by 2 at Pinnacle Bank Arena and losing to Duke, that shouldn't drop the Spartans that much. I don't hate what I see right there. I have the same 13 teams in the AP, in my AP, on my AP vote that the AP voters have obviously come up with right now. So I don't hate this poll. I have right now Nebraska at 7 on my ballot after the win against Michigan State. And I believe after that, I have Gonzaga and Houston at 8 and 9. And I kept Michigan State at 10. Alabama, Texas Tech, 13, 14. Little high for me for Texas Tech, but I don't hate it. Keep going, please. Arkansas at 15 and Illinois. So I have the same top 16 as the AP and as well as 17. I would not have dropped North Carolina to 17. I think I have them at 14. So I don't hate this, but again, I'm not completely aligned either. Georgia, Iowa, Louisville, Tennessee. Okay, that's very similar to mine. Georgia's a little bit high. I think I have Georgia in the low 20s. Let's see, 22 through 25. And then Kansas, Virginia, SMU, UCF. I opted to go with Villanova over UCF. Villanova is the others receiving votes category. So I don't hate this at all. I think it's a fair, poll right there by the AP voters. Interesting, though, when you think about the fact that SMU and UCF are 24 and 25. These programs came from the American Conference. Now, one is in the Big 12, one is in the ACC. Fascinating. But I do not obviously completely, hate what I'm seeing. My thing would be, I think UCF has earned the right, based on the start, to be ranked ahead of Kansas, especially if it just beat Kansas. I value the games. That is one thing. I value the games. So I don't if the resumes are comparable and we have a head-to-head meeting, like I would put Arkansas ahead of Texas Tech because Arkansas, beat Texas Tech. But that's just me. Now let's get into the live chat. Let's see, obviously, what's going on your minds this morning. And again, we want you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 350 likes on this show. TJ980i says, John, say St. John's wins out the regular season with losses twice to UConn and losing them in the Big East tournament. With those losses, what do you think the possible seed St. John's could be? St. John's cannot be thinking about seeding right now. St. John's needs to just be thinking about getting to the NCAA tournament. St. John's, again, has a massive week coming up with Butler and Creighton looming. Hinkle Fieldhouse, always one of the toughest places to win. And remember this, Butler has already lost at home to Villanova in conference play. Going to be very, very difficult game for St. John's. Matthew Dunham 4456 says, do you think the game again between Duke and Michigan, it's not, and this guy's saying at Duke, will be one of the best games of the season? That game is not at Duke. That game is in Washington, D.C. in February. Well, this is a regional Final Four type game that we're going to see in Washington, D.C. Great scheduling by Dusty May and John Shire. That game is in February. I am curious to see in that game Cam Boozer and Pat Gongba against the front line of Michigan. All right, let's keep taking your questions here. Eric Kodovitz 9688 says, John, St. John's 10-10 in the Big East. I don't see how they can make the NCAA tournament. This team has consistently disappointed at a high level. St. John's is going to have to win a lot more than 10 Big East games to get into the NCAA tournament. A lot more than 10. Okay. Z2 Wicked 859 says, John, Melvin Council should be receiving first-team All-Big 12 considerations at this point. He continues to carry Kansas. That is a tough argument to make because think about the players that we have right now this season in the Big 12. If you're making an All-Big 12 first team right now, A.J. DeBanza has to be on it. Joshua Jefferson has to be on it. Toppin and Christian Anderson have to be on it. That's 4 right there. And I think you also have to have Jaden Bradley on it because of the way he's played in these close games for Arizona. Emmanuel Sharp you can make a case for. But, yeah, that's a real tough one. 2 Wicked 859 says, Virginia is a sneaky second weekend kind of team. I agree. I think Virginia, again, is not getting enough credit for the roster composition. Points, wings, bigs, great depth, great shooting. Along with Dusty May, Ryan Odom is a coach that I've identified that's really doing a good job adjusting to the new college basketball because it's so different. You are not just a coach. You are not just a recruiter. You are a roster and program constructor. We'll keep going now. Big Jack 512 says, how is Kansas still ahead of UCF? Shake my head. That's why I dropped Kansas out of my poll. Let me look and see right here where I have Kansas. I have Kansas. I have them at 27. So I have Villanova, UCF, Kansas. That's how I have my poll as of now. What are your thoughts on Nebraska at Ohio State tonight? Spread as the Huskers at 1.5. Well, look, Nebraska, since joining the Big Ten, is 2-9 against Ohio State and Columbus. It is a very rare thing for a home team in the Big Ten to have a quad one opportunity against Nebraska at home. That is what the Buckeyes have. Look, it's been a solid, not spectacular start for Ohio State in its second full season under Jake Diebler. Big quad one opportunity at home tonight for the Buckeyes in Columbus. We'll get to that later in the show, and I will also get to some news and notes around the world of college basketball when we return. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you, subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We're the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to check out, obviously, Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want you to like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. We want to get up to 350 likes on the show, so please do that. And also a programming note, we will be coming to you live on Mondays and Thursdays throughout the 25-26 college basketball season at 1 o'clock Eastern. And in addition to those shows, we will be bringing you exclusive interviews with the biggest and the best names in the sport each and every week. Tuesday at 8 o'clock Eastern, I chat with Vanderbilt's Mark Byington. The Doors 14-0 entering Wednesday's game against Alabama. Now, let's get to some nuggets. Here's 3 good nuggets as we close out the show. Nugget number 1, Tyler's tear. I'm talking about Vanderbilt's Tyler Tanner, who has made a quantum leap in production from his freshman to sophomore year. In Vanderbilt's last 3 games, Tanner has 28 assists and just 3 turnovers. Nugget number 2, ascending in Athens. I'm talking about Georgia. The 13-1 start is the second best start since 1931 for Georgia basketball. Nugget number 3, Road Warriors. This is in relation to the USC Trojans. USC left Los Angeles on New Year's Eve. It played Michigan on Friday the 2nd. It will play at Michigan State tonight on January the 5th. And then it will play at Minnesota on Friday the 9th. That is a 10-day road trip for Eric Musselman and the Trojans, almost like an NBA team on the road. This is life in the Big Ten for those West Coast schools. 3 games to watch. Tuesday, Duke at Louisville. Pat Kelsey announced earlier today that Michael Brown, the talented freshman, will miss his 5th straight game with a back injury. Texas Tech at Houston, also Tuesday. Wednesday, we have the matchup in Nashville between Alabama and Vandy. 3 under-the-radar games between now and our next show on Thursday. Nebraska's at Ohio State tonight. Georgia is going to be at Florida on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, UConn goes to Providence. Always one of the great home court advantages in the sport. Once again, we need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now. And we want you to be all you can be. So again, subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We're the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. And also remember, exclusive interviews with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. We'll be back Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern. I chat with Vanderbilt's Mark Byington. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this was Inside College Basketball Now.